Before we start today's show, we just wanted to take a moment and give a huge thank you to the podcast sponsor, StreamYard. With StreamYard, you can stream directly from your browser, create a broadcast, show comments on screen, and see all of your comments in one place. With StreamYard, you can record HD video and audio. You can even go live with pre-recorded videos. Save, rewatch, and download past broadcasts. You can invite guests to your broadcast from any device. StreamYard makes it easy to run interviews, talk shows, podcasts, and so much more. You can simply get started with your own by heading on over to StreamYard.com. Now, without further ado, brought to you by Mindful Media Productions, you are now tuned into my favorite podcast, The Archives with Adam. Here is your host and my grandson, Adam.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of The Archives with Adam. I'm thrilled to kick off this show today with a very special guest, an American country music sensation whose talent runs deep in his veins. With 3 studio albums under his belt and a highly anticipated 4th one on the horizon, he's making waves in the industry, but that's not all. This multi-talented artist is also making his mark on the silver screen with an upcoming acting debut in a Western film that has fans buzzing with anticipation. Hailing from the picturesque town of Casey, Wyoming, he carries on the legacy of his father, the legendary country music icon Chris LeDoux. From playing drums in his father's road band, Western Underground, to carving out his own path as a solo artist, he's a true embodiment of country music tradition and innovation. So without further ado, please let me introduce to you guys Ned LeDoux. Ned, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Yes, sir. No, it's a pleasure and an honor. Your name came to mind most recently. My girlfriend and I, we went to our first, PBR rodeo, and I said, man, one person that stood out was Chris LeDoux, like his name, with the music and bull riding. But I said, Ned, he's like one of those people that you could still listen to his music and get that sense of, the legacy as well. And so I had to reach out and get you on. And, here we are today. Ned, how you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, thanks for having me on with a few technical difficulties, coming into this thing right out the chute.
It happens. It happens. But I'm glad we're making it happen. Again, it's an honor to have you on. I've grown up in a country household listening to your father, and throughout the years, I've gotten to listen to your music as well. It's hard to pass up listening to music, especially with, such a legendary name on it.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I'm proud to carry on the family tradition. Growing up playing drums, I never dreamed I'd ever play drums for my dad. I just wanted to just play in a band, so I played in a couple of different bands around Wyoming before my dad asked me to join him. I just appreciate you, just having me on the show, and just looking forward to the conversation.
Most definitely. And this platform is yours, so please talk about whatever you want. Share all kinds of stories that you like. I mean, it's here for you to use and, to chat about anything. So thank you again for being on.
Well, I'm horrible at telling jokes. So
Okay.
I've heard a lot of really nasty jokes, and then you went through one ear and out the other because they're like too bad to repeat. So we'll just stick to it. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to kick the show off by asking you some questions that I hope you enjoy being asked. So the first one I wanted to ask is, what was it like growing up in a small town like Casey, Wyoming? For me, I live here in Seattle, so it's more city, right? So I mean, when the furthest I get to like a country side of Washington is in the eastern Washington part. So kind of like there's a town called Ephrata. We have the Gorge in George, Washington. So if anybody ever says, have you ever been to George, Washington? I could say I've been to George, but that's the closest I get to like anywhere close to the country.
Yeah. Well, we actually got to play the gorge in George, the watershed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to do that a couple of years ago. But I love the Northwest. We played Puyallup, Washington, a number of times for I guess it's the state fair up there.
Correct.
Yeah. But yeah, growing up in a small town, Casey, Wyoming is about 265, and that's it. 265 wow. People. I think when I graduated high school, I think I was fourth in my class, but it was a class of about, I think, 14 kids, so going to a school with 100 kids total from kindergarten through 12th grade, and you're really into sports, you're guaranteed a spot on the team. You didn't have to worry about trying out, all that kind of stuff. But it was great. And even where we live now, we live in Northeast Kansas, me and my family, and we live way out in the sticks, as you can tell from our reception, But yeah, just growing up in a small town, everybody knows everybody, and in KC there was a little cafe, the Country Inn. And my folks used to go there almost every morning, have coffee with my grandparents, and talk about what needs to be done for the day, and just just the small community. It was just it was kind of like everybody had each other's backs, and yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about it, but it was just a great way to grow up, and I haven't been back there in a while. We only go back maybe a couple times a year, but it's just kind of in and out, and we don't really get to mingle around too much. But yeah, just a small town community. It's a great way to grow up.
It's definitely what we need nowadays, especially, I mean, where I'm at, there's a lot of crime and violence and stuff like that. And I wish I've lived in the small town living. I tell my girlfriend all the time, if I could live on a farm and have cows, pigs, horses, anything like that, I would trade it in any day.
Yeah.
It seems so much better, to be honest. You get to mind your own business. You get to say hey to the folks in your town, because it's so small, right? Like you said, it's only 256 people. It just makes it a little bit better.
Yeah, it's yeah, and there's always somebody that might need some help, and that's the thing about folks around these small communities that like, hey, if you need help pushing cows, or Northeast Kansas in the spring they burn their fields, they burn off the old and gets rid of weeds and things like that. And then later on, a couple of weeks later, it all comes back so green, and people like team up, like neighbors that maybe you don't see every day. Maybe you only see them in the spring for an event like the burning season in Northeast Kansas. But they show up in droves with their, gas sticks and water, and, side by sides and four wheelers and old pickup trucks full of big water tanks. And we just set the countryside on fire. But it's just, that's a little example of, the small town, country communities, like, even though we are very spread out, we're here to help if you need it.
True definition of Southern hospitality.
Yeah, exactly.
So outside of making music, what are some musicians, artists, bands that you enjoy listening to? Do you listen to strictly country music, or do you venture out?
Well, I might surprise you. Even though I wear a hat, I grew up, well, I'll try to make a long story short, but when I was a kid, I grew up listening to mainly country stuff. My dad was a big Charlie Daniels fan, so I grew up listening to nothing but Charlie Daniels. And then Sawyer Brown came out, and we're talking like, I guess, late 80s. And so I was a big fan of Sawyer Brown and Alabama and the Statler Brothers. I had a Statler Brothers cassette. And then my big brother Clay, who's 5 years older than me, gave me a ride to school one morning, which never really happened too often. I usually just took the bus. I don't know if for some reason he gave me a ride. Maybe I missed the bus, or maybe I had to be at school earlier. I don't know. But so we're just about to town. From the ranch into town is about 5 miles. And we're about 2 miles from town, and he pulls out this cassette tape. And at the time, he drove a 71 Chevy pickup, two-tone, yellow and white. And he had just put in this brand new stereo system. And he said, I just saw these guys in Casper, a couple of weeks ago. Let me know what you think. And he plugs this cassette tape in and cranks the volume knob as far as it'll go. And so before the music starts, you hear that shh, that white noise, and that sucker's going to be loud. And it came on, and I thought the doors were going to blow off the side of the truck. And it was Skid Row. It was Skid Row's first album. And I guess it was Sweet Little Sister was probably the first track. And in my little innocent ears, I think I was in third grade at the time. I didn't really know what to think, it's like kind of spooked me because I was listening to this real innocent, country stuff. But then a week or two went by, and I started kind of going through my brother's cassette collection. I was like, oh, what's this Motley Crue and then Van Halen and Cinderella and all these bands. And I started listening to them, without him in the room, because I thought maybe I'd get in trouble because I'm going through his stuff. And so I became a huge Motley Crue fan, huge Van Halen, Cinderella, Bon Jovi, all that stuff from the late 80s. And but yeah, that's still what I listen to today. And then I got into more of the heavier stuff like Megadeth and Metallica and Pantera. And I think the reason why I really that kind of drew me in was because of the drumming part. Because, the country stuff I was listening to, the drums were good. They were really good. But then you get into rock and roll, and you learn about guys like Tommy Lee and Alex Van Halen and John Bonham, and just they're so aggressive, and the volume is turned up, and the mix is so much better. So I was like, I want to learn what these guys are doing. So that's what kind of influenced me, and what I still listen to a lot to this day.
I'm glad you named off a lot of those because one, Sawyer Brown, that was my first concert ever. They're actually going to be here where you guys performed at in Puyallup at our state fair here this coming September. I told my girlfriend, I said, we got to go. She's not really much in the country, unfortunately, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
But
and they got a new album out too. They got a brand new album out. Yeah. I heard it's really good. I haven't heard it yet, but I've just heard little clips of it, but I heard it's really good.
Oh yeah, definitely. But man, you mentioned a lot of those 80s rock bands and then even heavy metal, where again, yeah, you're right. A lot of those, like a lot of the drumming legends have come from that. I'm a huge Slipknot fan.
Sure.
And they've revolved around so many drummers now. But the sound, it always sounds so good. But yeah, Motley Crue, phenomenal bands that you name.
Yeah, and I've been pretty lucky, just being in the right place at the right time. I've got like my two favorite. I got like kind of the top 5, maybe if I could go as far as the top 10. But my two favorite drummers of all time, it's mainly just because they influenced me at such an early age. But I got to meet them. I got to meet Alex Van Halen. They played at Fiddler's Green in Denver. I'm going to say 97, maybe 98. And me and my brother got to go backstage. My brother had a friend that had all these passes around his neck, and somehow he weaseled our way back there. And it was just a handshake and just say, man, it was great to meet you. I listen to your stuff all the time and I play along. And then I got to meet Tommy Lee at the Denver airport. Just a random deal. Denver, if you ever flown out of there, it's always crazy packed. And, so we go through security, and then you go down the escalator to the train. There's like 1,000 people down there. So I just kind of hung back. I was like, I'll just wait for the next one. Well, I wasn't the only one who had the same idea. I was just kind of standing there, and about 5 feet from me was the one and only Tommy Lee. I was like, dude. And we ended up getting on the same plane or same train together. And he sat down, and I was just kind of standing there next to him, trying not to make it look like I was like following him or anything, Mm-hmm. But I kind of looked down at him, and he looked up at me, and he kind of gave me one, just kind of a look over, and I was thinking to myself, man, if you don't reach out and just shake his hand and just say hi and introduce yourself, it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life, because you're probably never going to get this chance again. So I mustered up the courage, and I stuck out my hand. I said, Tommy, and he just like kind of stood back, and he was like, I was like, man, it's sorry, got some kids popping.
No, you're okay. You're okay.
I said, man, I just want to say hi. I said, you're my favorite drummer of all time. Just want to say hi. And he was really cool. He said, well, cool, man. Did you have a gig somewhere? And I sat down next to him, and we talked for, what seemed like only, 10 seconds, but, yeah, he was very cool. And they always say that, you never want to meet your heroes or your idols or whatever, but been pretty lucky to meet a lot of them, and they've all been very, very hospitable.
That's amazing. Now, I appreciate hearing that, because I had to introduce my girlfriend to Motley Crue, and I have no issue talking about them and how amazing they are. So no, I'm jealous.
Yeah. Well, hey, I was just in the right place at the right time,
Exactly. When it comes to shows, do you prefer to do like local fairs or arena shows?
Man, I think with our group, we're best suited for like the county fairs and the state fairs. We got to play some arenas opening up for Garth. We played Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. It was for the FFA, the National FFA convention. And I remember walking in there, and I think the place holds close to 70,000 people. And like, there's only a few people that are really fit for those kind of venues. and Garth being like kind of the king of all of them. It's like, yeah, I think we'll stick to, county fairs and state fairs and, some of the dance halls around the country. And the fun thing about these fairs, all the families show up, they got the little kids, and we'll be playing our show, and there's a bunch of kids playing in the dirt, and they got cotton candy stains all over their face. And, it's great, so I love more of the family events. And, but yeah, playing the arenas are fun because they're so big, but, yeah, just having those more of a family type of event, arenas are family, invite as well, but maybe it's just the smell of the dirt and what's going on in the pens behind the buck and shoots too.
Oh yeah, you could always appreciate a fair, and all the sights, everything, and then a concert to end it off just makes it perfect. So
yeah, and I was in the fair when I was in FF or in a 4-H when I was a kid, and so yeah, just getting to visit with some of those kids after the show at the merch table, and just seeing what they're taking in 4-H or FFA, and yeah, it's all good.
Definitely. So I wanted to kind of chat a little bit about your dad, because I know we're going to talk about him a lot during this episode, because obviously he's influenced you a lot. Now, one thing that I'm almost certain you get asked about quite a bit is, what is it like being Chris LeDoux's son? Growing up, learning from him, getting to watch him perform, even bull ride. What are some of the things besides music that you guys got to enjoy together?
Well, he was a bareback rider. He rode bucking horses.
True. Sorry.
He did get on a few bulls. I think it was mainly just some of his traveling partners entered him in the bull riding, And it's like, well, I guess if you're going to enter me, I'm going to show you that I can do it anyway. But, the one thing I've always said is if you were a rodeo fan and the history of the PRCA, Chris LeDoux is a 1976 bareback champion of the world. Now, if you're a country music fan and of Chris LeDoux, you know that he put on, in my opinion, probably the best show in country music ever, and put out some great music. He's got a catalog that goes all the way back to the mid 70s, early 70s. But if you're me or any of my siblings, you simply know him as Dad. And, he never brought that stuff to the house. We all knew of his success and, what he accomplished and everything. And I remember when he signed his record deal, I guess it would have been 89 or 90. And I remember he got back home and he went in the closet or something and he dug out his old riding glove, his rigging, his glove. And then he found a hammer and a nail and he pulled out this pin from his shirt and he put a nail in the wall and hung his glove up there and he stuck the pin in there. I said, like, what does this symbolize? What is this? He goes, well, I won the world bareback riding with that glove and I signed a record deal with that pin. So it's like two major accomplishments for him. And, but yeah, I mean, I've always just thought of him as Dad. I never think of him as Chris LeDoux. He was the salt of the earth. I mean, he loved being on the road. He loved being in front of his fans and meeting his fans and putting out music and playing shows. He loved playing shows. But I think above all that, he was just proud to be a good husband and a damn good dad.
There you go. Now, I appreciate hearing that.
Yeah.
I asked him that point of view because we all know him as a performer, right? But you know him as Dad, like you said, and you got to share a little bit with me, and I can always appreciate that.
Yeah.
So Cheyenne has been heard through country music with the likes of George Straits. I could still make Cheyenne to even the bull riding world with the likes of Lane Frost. Unfortunately, met his demise. But Cheyenne obviously is huge in the country music world. What did Cheyenne mean to you, your father, and your family?
Cheyenne, Wyoming, Cheyenne Frontier days. The earliest memories I have of it is losing about $20. I was probably like 8 years old, losing $20 at this like loop throwing thing, in the midway, trying to win this knife, which I ended up winning. And it ended up being a piece of crap. Like the handle fell apart. But Cheyenne, man, just the LeDoux history there goes back to, well, my dad went to school at Cheyenne Central back in the late 60s. And then of course he went on to rodeo, and he'd rodeo there every year, the end of July. And then went on to play the main stage. And even before the main stage, he had this booth set up sort of in the midway. They're like, next to his booth was a guy that was set up selling jewelry, and on the other side was somebody selling, balloons and, carnival toys and things like that. And but I remember, just going to the rodeo in the afternoon, and then maybe seeing a few night shows in the evening. And just the history of the LeDoux being there, with Dad playing the main stage and rodeoing. And then now that I've started doing my thing, we got to grace the main stage, I think 3 times now. It's just a special place. And, it's like the biggest thing to ever happen in Wyoming. As I've always kind of called it the Grand Ole Opry of the West, because it's probably the biggest stage that you'd ever play. Again, in my opinion, west of the Mississippi is the main stage at Cheyenne Frontier Days.
And you guys spread his ashes, right, over there at was it in Cheyenne as well?
Yeah, I guess it would have been, 05. Dad passed in March 9th of 05. And my little brother Bo rode bucking horses, bareback horses, for a number of years and did a great job. And I remember being there, and I don't remember if he was going to let us know or not. I think maybe he did. But all I was really kind of focused on was the ride that he made. I think he scored at 85. And I had my old video camera, and, and trying to film your brother, you're like, you don't want to watch this again, man. I'm just shaking, and, hope we can do the best you can. But yeah, he got off, and a great ride. And then he walks to the north end of the arena and takes his hat off. He was wearing a white shirt, buckskin chaps, and pulls this little bag out of his shirt pocket and scatters it out in the north end of the arena. So yeah, pretty special moment. So he'll be around Cheyenne haunting those bucking chutes for beyond forever.
Oh yeah, making his presence known.
Yeah.
One thing I really enjoyed seeing was your dad and Garth Brooks, how close they were together, right? I mean, they made wonderful music together, even to the point, even when your dad was sick, right? He offered up one of his livers, and unfortunately wasn't a match. But I mean, there was always that connection with them. Do you still talk to Garth to this day? I mean, I seen you, present him a statue, which was amazing. Do you still talk to him to this day? Do you have a connection with him?
Haven't heard from him in a while. I think him and my little brother Will, talk back and forth, about merchandise and stuff like that or whatever. But, but one thing I'm really looking forward to someday, maybe going down to Nashville and checking out this new bar they opened up. I think it's like Friends in Low Places or something. But Garth, the thing about Garth, he's always been so good to the LeDoux family, and we try to show him and Trisha, the same love and respect back. And the fact he allowed me to open up the show for him and Cheyenne. It's been, I don't know, about 3 years ago, it was the 125th annual Cheyenne Frontier Days, and we got to open up the show. And then he invited me out to sing "What You Gonna Do with the Cowboy" with him during his show, and he was there for this unveiling of this bronze statue that Cheyenne Frontier Days put up of Dad. And as far as that statue or sculpture that was presented to Garth, that came from the artist Mike Thomas, who's from Buffalo, Wyoming, and also from the committee of Cheyenne Frontier Days, and also kind of presented on behalf of the LeDoux family. And but yeah, he's I don't know. He's just a great guy. Garth is, just always love being in his presence. Always love being around him. And yeah, he's just a great guy.
Definitely. He's the concert that is a must see. I have not seen him yet. Every time he comes here, he sells out so quick. And
sure. Yeah.
That's a bucket list. That's for sure.
Yeah. That's
yeah. So I want to talk about your music. As we talked about earlier, the impact that your father had on it. I mean, it's crazy how much you guys sound alike with the music, not just the music, but even when you talk. But again, your father left an inedible mark on the world of country music. How has his legacy influenced your own musical journey? And how do you strive to honor that legacy while foregoing your past still?
Well, when somebody says I sound a lot like him. The only response I can really say is that's the best compliment I could ever get. And that's a fact, because I never like recorded my voice, and it's like, well, I need to go lower or higher, it's just what comes out, but, to tell you the truth, singing was never really my plan. I up until about, I guess it's been quite a few years ago back now. I mean, Dad's been on for a little over 19 years, which is hard to believe, but
crazy.
I know. But so all I ever wanted to do was be a drummer, and I've been very fortunate to play in some really good bands along with my dad, and a side project that was called Lucky Black. We were kind of like this, rock band that was sort of like a Black Crowes, Tom Petty type of group. I had a lot of fun in that. And then when Dad passed away, there was a group of guys that I'd become really good friends with. It was Dustin Evans and the Good Times Band. They were based out of, in the South Dakota folks would know this. They're based out of East River, so they're east of the Missouri. And so anyway, Dad passed away, and Dustin himself called me up and said, man, I'd like for you to come play drums for us. The job's yours if you want it. I said, when's the next gig? And he said, well, we got a gig in Lincoln, Nebraska in a couple of weeks. I said, well, I'll be there. And so I went and played this gig with them, and that was my start with the band. But it was a Friday, Saturday gig. And Friday night, we get done with the show, we go back to the motel, and we're all just kind of hanging out, still kind of wide awake. And Dustin has the guitar, his acoustic out, and was playing. We just had a group of buddies kind of hanging out. And he got up to go get a beer or something, and he hands me the guitar and goes, here, why don't you play one of your dad's songs? I said, well, I don't sing. I'll hold on to it for you, So I'm sitting there holding this guitar and waiting for him to come back. He said, do you know any of your dad's songs? I said, I know the words to almost all of them, but I don't sing, man. And so I sat down in this corner with him, and he's playing, I think it was like 10 Seconds in the Saddle, maybe Tougher Than the Rest. And he rattled off a few of them, and I'm just kind of sitting there humming along with him. And so anyway, we get done with the night or the weekend, and I'm driving back home from Lincoln, Nebraska, back to KC, which is a little over 700 miles. So I got a lot of time to think and work things out. And I was just thinking, man, that'd be kind of fun. If I could figure out, just some guitar parts and learn a handful of songs. And if I'm sitting around a cheap motel room or a campfire, or just to sit on my front porch and just sing to the birds, it might be kind of fun to do. And so as soon as I got home, like the next day, I've been playing guitar for a number of years, but I'm self-taught, as you can probably tell. I'm not a very good guitar player. I know just enough to write a song with it, but I'm not going to step out front and, reel off a solo or anything. So I learned just a handful of songs, and then, during the breaks, during those Dustin Evans shows, I would get my guitar out of the case, and I'd stand up and I'd sing like 3 or 4 songs with my head down. It's like, I know nobody's really listening, but it's like, it was kind of my way of getting my feet wet. And even during Western Underground shows, I would get out and play just one song by myself and give everybody in the band a break. But then eventually, like, people like bar owners, like, hey, you think you play like a 45-minute set? It's like, I don't know. I might have to repeat my songs. I don't know that many songs, which isn't very long, 45-minute set. It's like 15 songs, whatever. So that's kind of how it started. I started playing solo gigs in these little dive bars, and I played a golf course a couple of times, and I didn't get any free golf from it, but I got paid for the gig. But it's just kind of funny thinking back on how it all kind of started, and now it's led us to where we are today, getting to open up shows for Garth and Toby Keith, God rest his soul. And, and now I got 3 albums out and moving on to my 4th. So, it's been a crazy journey.
Definitely. I do want to talk about that 4th one. Is there anything like you could share on that right now? Is there like a name of it yet? I know you're going to get ready to go in here next month actually and start working on it.
Yeah, pretty soon. Man, that's probably one of the hardest things besides writing the songs. Writing the songs is the hardest thing about putting out a new album or putting together one. And it's one thing I discovered on my first album. It's like, okay, I got these songs written. We go in the studio, we record them. It takes about 3 or 4 days. And then you got to come up with a title for the album. Like, really? We got it. And so, yeah, like I spent all this time writing, and now I got to come up. And it sounds really simple. Just name it after a song. Well, there was not a song on the album that really stood out. So that first album was called Sagebrush because, like the majority of the songs, I mean, they're all about the West, being a cowboy and growing up in the country and working cows or maybe rodeoing. There's only a certain part of the country that has sagebrush, and it's out west, so sagebrush. But one thing that, for anybody who kind of listens to my music or follows me along, they know that I'm always going to add one of Dad's songs on every album. So on the first album, Sagebrush, I had Johnson County War. And then on the second one, I put Homegrown Western Saturday Night, which was off of my favorite album he ever put out, was Powder River. And then on my last album, Buckskin, I put He Rides the Wild Horses. And so on this new album, I'll be including another one of his songs that he wrote. And that's the point, is adding a song that he wrote, not from an outside writer, but a song that he wrote. It just means a little bit more. It's something that he came up with himself. But I'm still waist deep in the songwriting. So I wish I could tell you a little bit more.
I respect that.
I will tell you this. There's probably more songs on this album that came from outside writers than from my own pen. Because I've always written I guess kind of the lion's share of the songs. But I thought I'd reach out to some friends of mine and just kind of see if they have anything that's been sitting on the shelf, and they've sent me some pretty good stuff. And with a couple of them, I've kind of tweaked them a little bit and asked if that's okay. And they're like, yeah, man, do what you got to do, to make it fit with what you're doing. But I'm really excited. So yeah, the end of June, I'll be back in the studio and with the great Mac McAnally, which I'm so fortunate to work with. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Definitely. And I mean, he worked with your dad. I mean, he's been carrying that on over with you. And I was going to talk about him at one point, but I think this is a perfect time. Obviously Mac is a highly respected musician and producer. How does his mentorship help shape you or the direction of your music?
I just love his simplicity, and he's kind of like a chameleon or some kind of animal like that. He can, he's played with Jimmy Buffett for over 30 years, and we lost a legend at way too young. And Mac's probably busier now than he's ever been. He's out playing his own gigs and playing these tribute shows to Jimmy as well. But yeah, Mac is a songwriter. I mean, he can write a song about sailboats and the beach and that kind of stuff, eating fish. And then he can turn around and write a song about barbed wire and rusty pickup trucks and cows and bucking horses. And so he's a great guy to just kind of throw ideas back and forth with. And that's actually earlier today before I got on here with you, I was just giving him some ideas that I came up with, because I'm always open to suggestions, especially if I'm throwing the ball back and forth with Mac. But yeah, and the thing with him as well, and he probably doesn't realize this, but the way he talks, not maybe the way he talks, but his phrasing, it's like the things he says. He's from Mississippi, and he's got a studio in Muscle Shoals, and there's got to be something in the water. You know, it's like, man, I've been meaning to get like this little tape recorder and stick it in my pocket and push record. And we'll go out and have some supper, and there's going to be a couple of songs probably coming from this conversation. You know, it's just the way he talks, you know, the way he phrases things is what you would never really hear from anybody else. It's almost like he's got a continuous wheel of song ideas going on in his head, you know, and even through a simple conversation over a cup of coffee or, you know, having something to eat. But yeah, I'm very fortunate to be able to work with him. Yeah. Mac McAnally.
And I mean, you have a lot of people, you know, that back you. I mean, I even have to say thank you to Mark Sissel for making this happen with us. And he obviously worked with your dad as well in Western Underground and what you were a part of as a drummer. So I got to thank him for that too.
Yeah, Mark, you know, I've known him since '89. I think I might have been 12 or 13 at the time. And he's kind of the one who, you know, steers the ship, you know, the way it needs to go. You know, they all call me the captain, but I'm more like the, you know, Captain Jack Sparrow up there, just like, yeah, just do what you got to do, boys, you know. But yeah, Mark, he's such a good guy, and he's got a good head on his shoulders, and, you know, he's been there, done that, and he knows the ins and outs of the business and stuff that I don't quite understand, but if something comes up, you know, I'll just pass it on to Mark, and he'll take care of it, you know. And I think for him, you know, that all started from being the road manager for Dad, because I think he got to a point, you know, when they're on the road with him, somebody had to be, you know, a manager on the road. So Dad kind of appointed Mark as the road manager, and so Mark, he does a great job, you know, and you know, very proud to have him still along for the ride.
I could tell you, I mean, yeah, you could tell that he handles things properly. I mean, just talking with him, you know, through email like we had been, and it just, he was so prompt, he was straight to the point, and he just made it happen. And I could tell you some of my experiences while setting up episodes have not been the best. I mean, I've had managers or people that handle the emails just drop the ball, and it just makes for bad conversation. So I definitely could appreciate that. So,
well, with our group, you know, once upon a time when we were playing with Dad, there was 13 of us, and Dad was never one of these acts where, you know, we would have like 3 or 4 buses out on the road. It was one bus and one tractor trailer that hauled all the staging equipment and all the backline stuff. And all of us would live on one bus together. Every bunk was filled. Dad slept in the back lounge, and it was fun. You know, I mean, there's a lot of bumping elbows and shoulders and stuff back in those days, but everybody got along. You know, we all figured out what not to do with this, you know, what not to say or whatever. But now there's only 7 of us on a tour bus that has 12 bunks and a back lounge. And so there's all this space on the bus, you know, like, wow, we can do all kinds of stuff. Now we got junk bunks and that kind of stuff. But the cool thing about this group is we've all been together, gee whiz, for a few decades, you know. And my whole thought is like, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, we don't need this. We don't need that. We don't need to change this. Everybody's cool with what we're doing. And And it's very cool to go into a venue that maybe we've never played before, or maybe go back and like the stage guys or the local sound company will say, man, we're glad you guys are back in town, because you were like the easiest group of guys we've ever worked with. You know, I mean, what do you guys need? And like, you know what we need. It's just very simple. Like, let's have a rock and roll show. You know, this is it, you know? And so, yeah, it's great to get the feedback from different places that we've been around the country where they say, you're just some of the easiest guys to work with, you know. That's a good thing.
No, definitely, especially when there's so much, you know, that goes on with it. So yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, no, I wanted to ask you because I mean, you were more of a drummer, right, than you were a singer, and then like you said, you picked up a guitar and you would sing a little bit, not thinking, you know, that anybody would be listening. But like, what ultimately got you into wanting to write music and performing it? Like, was there something that just clicked one day and said, "Hey, this is it"?
See, as far as like getting into songwriting, I guess it was not long after Dad had passed. My mom was kind of going through the attic and, you know, Dad's office, you know, making sure there wasn't any, you know, leaf unturned, I suppose, you know, paperwork stuff. But she came across this cardboard box, you know, it was full of paperwork, and she got to thumbing through it. Well, it wasn't anything like, you know, tax papers or anything. It was song ideas. And for the majority of it, nothing was finished. You know, there were some songs in there that were finished. And the cool thing about it is all handwritten, all in pen or maybe pencil. But yeah, a lot of it wasn't finished. And so instead of like putting it up in the attic, you know, to where nobody could ever get this stuff ever again, she made a few copies. Like, she handpicked like a dozen different sheets of these ideas and made copies and sent them to Dad's management, and thought, well, maybe there's somebody in your industry that could maybe try to finish one of these. Maybe they could help out. Well, Mark Sissel, who also works for TKO Artist Management, got a hold of him. I think he was probably the first one to get him. And he turns around and sends them to me. and we had just moved to Kansas, and this was probably like 2011, I think, maybe. And he said, hey, man, why don't you try to finish one of these song ideas your dad started, you know? Be like a brand new Chris LeDoux song co-written with the son. How cool would that be? I said, yeah, Mark, that's pretty cool idea, but I've never written a song in my life. And so I did my best to kind of add something to it. And I was like, man, I don't know what to do. And you know, I'd sit at the dinner table with my guitar and a cup of coffee and these notes and try to do something. I look out the window and it's a bright, beautiful, sunshining day, and the birds are singing and flying around. It's like, there's probably something out there I should probably be doing instead of sitting here trying to do something I don't know how to do. And that's when Mac stepped in. He's on the same management, and he found out what I was trying to put together, and he said, well, why don't you come on down to Nashville and we'll sit together and we'll go over a couple of these ideas that we've been working on, because Mark had sent those same ideas to him. And so, yeah, I flew down there and we sat together. And the first song that we wrote, we titled it, You Can't Tell Me We Ain't Got It All. That's kind of a long title version, but simplified, We Ain't Got It All. And it just came from it's a little idea that Dad started about a rusty pickup truck full of posts and barbed wire. And there's firewood in the stack. I guess money's all we lack. That was what Dad had. And then me and Mac added a little bit more to it. And so from that point on, it was like I kind of learned from Mac in a very simple way on how to piece together, you know, the structure of a song, you know, like a verse, chorus, bridge, then chorus, outro, or however you want to do it. And I had these ideas, and the one thing I've heard a lot of people say, you know, songwriters, it's like you got your whole life behind you to write that first album. And so I was, what was I, 35, 36 when my first album, Sagebrush, came out. So I had that many years behind me to write these songs, all these ideas. And it just kind of, and Mac was like, yeah, it's going to flow like water. You know, you're going to, once you kind of break into that well, it's just going to be coming out. So I had like Never Change, Some People Do, Brother Highway, The Hawk, and all these other songs just come flowing out. Forever a Cowboy. He said, then the challenging part is when you get into your second album, because you might have to drill a well someplace else, you know. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the credit goes to Mac as far as the songwriting, because he's the one who just kind of cracked my head open and said, and it was like, here it is, you know, this is how you do it. And so I'm cracking my head against the concrete floor trying to come up with ideas for a fourth album. So you can only imagine. Yeah.
Definitely. So I'm gonna ask just a couple more questions, and we'll call it a wrap for the night. But I know, so one of my mantras is to strive for progress, because there's no such thing as perfection, right? You can always just keep getting better, but never forget where you came from is a mantra that resonates deeply with you, right?
Yeah.
And as evidenced by your commitment to honoring your roots while pursuing your dreams, how do you stay grounded in the midst of success and fame?
I'm not sure how I do it. I think it was just instilled in me at a young age, you know, from my mom. My mom is the rock of this family. And yeah, I just remember at a young age, you know, even if it was just the most simple thing of just going to town to see a movie, me and my brothers or whatever, is like, don't forget where you came from, you know, be good, you know. And so I think that just resonated, you know, on to where I am today. And just, it's the golden rule. If you can live by the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, then you're in a pretty good spot, you know. And just, you know, do the best you can. I mean, it sounds really simple, maybe a little cliche, you know. I don't think I've ever even used that word before, but it's just kind of what you got to do, you know. It's yeah, just treat people the way you want to be treated, and you'll be okay.
And
Sometimes
we definitely
you
need
don't
that.
get sometimes you don't get that same respect back, but you know, just move on, you know.
Exactly. And we need that in today's day and age. I mean, where I'm at is probably a little different than where you're at, per se, as in like how people are living. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot of toxic people in my neck of the woods. So
Well, send them down here, you know. We'll put them in work or something, you know.
oh yeah.
Nothing mean. We're not being mean around here. Just enjoy the open air, and you know, I'll put them on the gas stick. We'll drag some fire in the spring. We'll burn a bunch of fields, and yeah.
There you go.
It'll be fun.
So for me, I grew up in a country listening household, like I mentioned, and there was a lot of music that I listen to nowadays that brings back a lot of memories, right? One of the most incredible things about great music is that the ability to take a listener to a place they'd rather be. You know, and typically a compelling song can carry someone back in time, right? And your music kind of has that power. As a songwriter, you have the knack for bringing people to places and emotions vibrantly to life with your insightful lyrics, and that's typically, you know, what I feel when I hear your music. But those gifts were fully on display with your latest album, Buckskin. So to continue with that, like, where did that inspiration come from? Is it like your surroundings, or was it more like the things you had seen while being on the road? Like, how would you explain that?
Well, with my songwriting method, or I take a lot of notes. I got like these antennas. I'm always listening to what people have to say. Maybe somebody phrases something in a way that I've never heard before, and I'll just make a little note. Or I could be outside, cutting wood or doing some landscape stuff or mowing or whatever it might be, and it sounds strange, but an idea will kind of pop up. So I'll shut everything down, shut the chainsaw off, and I'll make a note in my phone or write something down if I got a pen and paper. And I'll go back to what I was doing. It doesn't mean I'm going to stop the job I was at and then start writing a song. There's a job that I started, I need to finish it. But once I get all these notes kind of gathered up, then I'll come down in my basement and kind of gather them all up and piece them together, grab my guitar and see what comes out of it. But I always think back to all my years of, working on the ranch in Wyoming, and I get back there, every now and then. My little brother, Bo, kind of took over the place, and it looks probably better now than it ever has, and he's always going to put me on the swather, or maybe we'll get up there during branding season or something like that. But I always think back to all those days of, working with my granddad and my siblings on the ranch, and most of the songs that I write, when it comes to ranching songs, and definitely rodeo songs, I never rodeoed myself. I mean, I rode a few steers when I was a kid, but I think coming from a rodeo background family, I think I know enough about it to, at least write a song. So it's not about me. It's about, the group of guys that I've been around. And I just love reaching back in my Rolodex memory of, just working on the ranch, and I'll kind of make up these characters, even though these characters are real to life. You just can't see them from the road. And even songs about being on the highway, there's always guaranteed going to be a song about being on the road and the love for the highway. And I remember, there's a couple of songs that are going to be on this new album about being on the road. And I sent them some demo stuff to my managers, like, some more traveling songs, huh? Yeah. So it's inevitable, man. I mean, that's what we do. We travel. So I just kind of reached back, just good memories, make for pretty good songs.
Definitely. So when you perform songs like of your dad's, like This Cowboy Hat, that it was again a song that was sang by him, it must carry a unique and emotional weight. Can you share with me what your thoughts and feelings as they run through your mind when you sing and perform that song, especially considering the connection to your family and that legacy?
Yeah, well, during our shows, we're always going to play some of Dad's songs. I mean, even though I got, 3 albums out now, and I could fill a 90-minute show with nothing but Ned LeDoux songs, but I would never do that. I'm always going to play some of Dad's songs, whether you want to hear them or not. We're going to play them. And I know the crowd just eats it up. We play, like you said, This Cowboy's Hat. We play 8 Second Ride, Copenhagen, Western Skies. And it's just kind of a handful of kind of my personal favorites, but they're also, the fans, the people that show up, they're looking forward to hearing them. But I just love playing them, and when I started off singing, I didn't have any songs of my own. And for some reason, I thought back to this, like, the only songs I ever learned were Dad's songs. I never thought about learning anybody else's except for his, and we're always going to play those songs. And it feels like, when we do play those songs, it feels like he's kind of standing right next to me. If he's not standing there, he's sitting on the drum riser, just with a big grin on his face, just happy to see us kind of carry on his torch.
Definitely. That's awesome. No, it's always good to feel like somebody's there. For me, I lost my grandma in September, and that's kind of why I do these shows, is because, one, I mean, I have a sports one as well where I talk to athletes and things like that. And we were, she was the biggest Husky fan that I knew, UW Husky fan, and so I've been talking to a lot of those guys, and it's kind of my way to keep that going. So, and feel like that sense there, but. Before I let you go, I do want to ask about that Western that you were in. I'm not sure what more you could talk about it, but we kind of briefly spoke a little bit about you had completed that. Is there anything you could speak on that?
Well, I'll tell you what I know, and that's not a whole lot.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure when they're planning on releasing this thing or even a trailer. I thought they were going to do some kind of trailer earlier this year. Apparently, putting a movie together is a whole different thing compared to an album, music. But it was a great experience. They had me come in to be the sheriff. I was Sheriff William O'Connell, and I got to spend horseback 2 days just outside of Cody, Wyoming, is where they filmed the part that I was in. Anyway, I think I don't know all the locations where they filmed this thing, but the title of the movie is called Buffalo Daze, Daze, and the actors and actresses that are in this, I've just seen a few of them are from. They've done their backgrounds themselves. They've done some incredible, or been a part of some pretty amazing films, and so this is my first one, and so it was pretty cool, just to, kind of play dress up. I looked the same way with this character. I guess he had a big old bushy mustache. And so that was her plan, was to put this big mustache on me. And so I was in makeup, and thankfully the director was in there with me. And makeup lady says, "So I guess we're going to put a mustache on you, huh?" I said, "I guess so. If anybody who knows me, I can't grow one. I mean, this is like 3 weeks growth already right here. I can't do that." And so after she said that, the director said, no, we're not going to be putting a mustache on him. No, we'll just have him shave, and he'll be a clean cut William O'Connell from Dubuque, Iowa, is where this guy. But the thing is, it's all like real life. This stuff really happened. It could almost be a docu-film, but they decided to turn it into a movie. So that's about all I have for you right there.
There you go. I mean, that's enough. I'm looking forward to it. When Mark told me about it, and I was just like, man, okay, I'll have to keep an eye out. So, Ned, I do appreciate you coming on. It's been wonderful. New music coming soon from Ned, a new movie, hopefully a tour. Hopefully we catch you here somewhere in Washington. Not sure where you would play, but hopefully we'll catch you in town sometime.
We'll be up there. Yeah, if I had my schedule in front of me, I could tell you exactly where we're going to be. But yeah, we'll be up there eventually.
Perfect. Well, I'll definitely have to come out, catch the show, hopefully introduce myself to you formally. But it was a pleasure having you on. A huge honor. So.
Well, thanks, Adam. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yes, sir. Well, hey, you have a great rest of your night, and we'll chat soon.
All right. We'll see you, buddy.
Take care.
I just wanted to take a moment and thank the podcast sponsor, StreamYard. Without StreamYard, none of this would be possible. I also want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching this episode, whether you're streaming it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or watching on YouTube. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for many more episodes.